Dear ladies and gentlemen, since Donald Trump's election campaign in 2016, our society discusses about free speech and sets new boundaries of hate speech and fake news. Today, the debate is more actual than ever. I am very excited to talk with Mr. Miller about the political and social transition of our debate culture. Welcome, Mr. Miller.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you.
Thank you so much. As political advisor, Mr. Miller has been chief spokesman for Mr. Donald Trump's election campaign in 2016. 2020 has been the senior advisor at the Donald Trump's re-election campaign. Since 2021, he is the CEO of Gettr and particularly stands up for free speech. Let us come to my first question. Mr. Miller, how can we experience social free speech today?
Well, I think the media has tried to force a false binary choice, saying that you can have free speech, but it's reckless if you have free speech, or it can all be controlled and locked down by the government with them choosing who gets free speech and who doesn't if we want to have it safe. What we have shown with Gettr is that you can have free speech, you can have this open political discourse, this exchange of ideas, and have a safe and inviting platform. There's no such thing as a choice. You can do both at the same time.
Do you think we have free speech today outside of Gettr?
I think that our free speech rights are rapidly disappearing, not just in the United States, but here in Germany, in the United Kingdom, in Brazil, and countries all around the world. I'm very concerned about this new law, the Digital Safety Act that the EU has passed, where they're going to start to dictate who gets free speech and who doesn't. I'm very concerned about the online safety bill being debated in Parliament, and very concerned about the Ministry of Information or the Ministry of Truth that Joe Biden tried to put into effect in the United States. And what we're finding are these left of center progressive governments trying to exercise authoritarian control and shut down our ability to communicate.
So if I am understanding you right, we are somehow missing free speech these days. Since when do you think we don't have free speech anymore?
Well, in many ways, I think that the COVID-19 pandemic was the beginning of the end for many of our free speech rights. I think that many governments have conditioned people to be used to being censored and blocked and locked down. And now we have it where you have big tech, so Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, companies like this who are now picking winners and losers in free speech. If you agree with them, you have all the free speech that you want. If you disagree with them, or if you ever want to exercise democracy or challenge authority, then you don't have free speech. They'll shadow ban you or kick you off.
Let us talk about Twitter later. I have some questions about that as well. First, I want to ask you if you think that we have political correctness on the one hand and political safe spaces on the other hand. What do you think is important now these days?
Well, the two principles that Gettr was founded on was that we support free speech and that we oppose cancel culture. And what the big tech companies have started to do is, would it be shadow ban or change the algorithm, or they make it so some people's voices never get across, or other people get sentenced to what I call digital jail for reasons they don't even understand why. And this culture of political correctness is really out of control. In fact, I would have to apologize to the people of Germany and say that this is the worst ever export from the United States, is woke culture, because it's gripping the EU and in Germany and France just as much as it's hitting in the United States.
Let us dive into social media then. How do you feel about Musk taking over Twitter?
So I think his ideals, I think the goals of getting someone in there to stand up for free speech and take some of our rights back from big tech is a worthy goal. I think that's fantastic. I don't ultimately think that the deal goes through, but even if for some reason it did, I don't think the culture there at Twitter can be changed. I think Musk would have to fire every single person in the building, whether it be the entry-level coder or the engineer or the moderator, because the culture there is not one of free speech, but it's one of political discrimination. And as I've joked before, it might be easier for Elon Musk to land a rocket on Mars than change the culture at Twitter.
A great competitive advantage of Gettr has been the freedom of speech and no censorship. Musk stands for the same, he says. Is it a competitive loss for Gettr that Musk takes over Twitter?
So if Musk were to take over, of course, that's going to be a challenge just because there are going to be less people who'll be leaving Twitter. But where we've started to carve out a unique identity with Gettr is the live streaming, where we're now up to 150 million views on various live stream channels since last October. So we have content creators who are coming to Gettr and saying, we want to broadcast on Gettr. So we're becoming a destination for entertainment. But then we've also added our short video format, Vision, which is our competitor to TikTok and Instagram Reels, and we've put it all together in one platform. That's the one thing where I think Twitter really misses out is the future. When you talk particularly about younger social media users, they want that short video format, and Twitter is not built for that. Gettr is.
Would you say there's some kind of political bubble on Gettr, and how can you support a diverse debate on Gettr?
So, really good question there, and I get this question quite a bit. Right now, the passion in the free speech debate is largely in the center-right space. That's just the reality, because if you're in the center-left, you're not getting kicked off of the big tech platforms. And quite frankly, your friends aren't getting kicked off of the big tech platforms. But with Gettr, our goal is to have people all across the spectrum. We do have people from the left, we have people from the right, we have people who don't really care about politics. And in fact, one of the biggest growth areas that we're targeting are people in sport, entertainment, arts, things of that nature, where maybe they might have a political perspective, but they're known for other things. They're not politicians, or they're not necessarily very politically active. But we believe that as the pendulum for free speech swings back and more people on the left and center left are being discriminated against, that's when we think more of them will come together.
Let's just talk about politics a bit. How do you feel about the midterm elections? Do you think the still existing public state of emergency because of Corona can affect the midterm elections coming autumn?
Another good question, because the Biden administration is already warning, saying that there's going to be a massive flare-up of COVID just before the election. Imagine that. But as you look at the polling numbers, the U.S. has 2 houses in our legislative branch. The House, the lower chamber with 435 seats, all of them are up for re-election. Right now, the Democrats control it, but Republicans should win somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 40, maybe 50 seats, so they should win that comfortably. In the Senate, where we have 100 members, 2 from each state, 2 from each of the 50 states, it's tied 50-50, but the Democrats have the tiebreaker with the vice president. I think the Senate's going to be much closer. Republicans, I think, will have a net gain of 1, maybe 2. So Republicans will have a solid majority in the House and a very, very slim, maybe even 51-49 majority in the Senate.
You're quite close to President Trump. Do you think he will run again for president, and how will his chances be?
I hope so. I've certainly advised him that I think that he should, and I wish he'd declare already and say that he's doing it, which I think would be to his advantage. Right now, the polling shows that he would pretty handily defeat Joe Biden or Vice President Kamala Harris. So I do think President Trump runs. I don't think ultimately it's going to be against Joe Biden, though. I think the Democrats will push out Joe Biden, and I don't think Kamala Harris will win the Democratic primary. Could be someone like California Governor Gavin Newsom.
So let's see what comes out about that. There have been allegations of voter fraud from President Trump in the past. At the end, did anything come out about that?
So there have been numerous examples of voter fraud and irregularities. I did not see enough voter fraud and irregularities on election day itself to have tilted the election. But what I described more of the bigger problem in 2020 was that the system was legally rigged. And I want to explain that because it might seem like an oxymoron. Many of the rules that were changed, the voting rules in the various states, were changed outside of the framework as laid out in the Constitution. And so they liberalized many of the voting policies. Say, for example, they sent out ballots to people who didn't even have a formal request in to get ballots. And I think the way that the rules were changed in the middle of the game unfairly aided the Democrats in the process and ultimately Joe Biden. I think it's beholden on Republicans to change many of those rules back in advance of 2024. And I hope that we do that.
What are the problems in the US right now, and what key points would Trump have in his election campaign?
Well, many of the problems that the U.S. is facing are the same things that people here in Germany are facing, which is inflation, concern about the world environment, whether it be Russia invading Ukraine, whether it be the rise of the CCP in communist China. These are very serious issues. Of course, our southern border with illegal immigration is also a massive problem. But I tell you, Joe Biden seems to be faltering at every step. He's literally falling off of his bike. He's being led around by the Easter Bunny. So it's not a good look right now.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.